All right, everyone, this is some sample data from the activity that we did yesterday. This came from one group, and it turned out to be really, really good data. If you weren't here yesterday, this is the data that you should end up using. Now, don't copy this down right now. Okay, the place that you're going to get this data from is actually not the spreadsheet that you see in front of you, but rather the place that you're going to get it from is a graph, or is actually a number of graphs. If you go to my website, you can click on a link down here where it says Friction Lab Sample Data. That's going to take you to a document that has data for 10 trials. It is the mass and the force versus time graph for each of the 10 trials. Trial number one, you can see that the maximum force here is 1.3 newtons. Okay, if we scroll down, we can see that trial number 2 has a maximum force of 1.44 newtons. If we scroll down even further, we can see that trial 3 has a maximum force that looks to be about 1.95 newtons. So we can see the maximum force by just looking at the graphs here. We can see the mass by looking at the mass just below the title of the graph. Does that make sense? Your data table is going to look like the data table that I have right here, mass and friction force, and you're going to get the mass and the friction force from each of these graphs. All right, so let's say you have the mass and the friction force. What are we going to do with that now? Well, the first thing we got to do is get the normal force from the mass, because of course, we don't want to plot a graph of friction force versus mass. We want to plot a graph of friction force versus normal force. So let's get the normal force. The easiest way to do that, to be honest, is to use your spreadsheet. Okay, use Microsoft Excel. Let's insert a column right here. Okay, so now we've got 3 columns. We've got mass, we got blank, and we got friction force. That second column is going to be my normal force. And of course, that's going to be in newtons. Since it's on a flat horizontal surface, the normal force will simply be equal to the force of gravity. Bless you. So in order to calculate the normal force for each one of these, what I want to do is not calculate it with my calculator. I want to create a little formula in there. Okay, you can see there that I'm in column B, and I'm in cell 2 right now. So we're going to call that B2. This would be B3, this would be B4, B5, and so on. I want to take A2, cell A2, and I want to multiply that by 9.81. So I'm going to type in equals A2 times, whoops, that's not times 9.81. That gives me a normal force here now of 2.49174 newtons. Now, the beauty of this is I've only entered that formula once. I can copy that formula all the way down. Can't do it on here, I don't think. I think I'm going to have to use my computer to do it. I can copy it all the way down by literally clicking on the bottom right-hand corner, dragging it down, and then all of a sudden, you've got the normal force for each and every trial. Does that make sense? Now, these 2 columns, right here and right here, are the 2 columns that I'm going to plot the graph of. So I'm going to show you how to plot that graph in just 1 second. We want to plot this graph. We've got to highlight our Y column. It's easy. Literally, highlight the Y column minus where it says friction force. Highlight the Y column. You're going to insert a scatter plot. You're going to pick the first one with no lines on it. Okay, that doesn't look very good, does it? But now when we notice the x-axis doesn't actually have the variables that we want. Okay? We want going from anywhere from 2 to 5 here. This goes from 0 to 12. So that doesn't seem to be right. Let's select our x-axis. Okay, we're going to select data. We're going to edit. We're going to select our x values right here. This is our x-axis. The normal force on the x-axis, the friction force on the y-axis. Watch what happens now when I select that data for the x-axis. All of a sudden, this data looks a lot straighter now, right? This line looks a lot straighter. Exactly the way it's supposed to look. Now I want to click on this chart layout right here, just so I got an opportunity to enter my chart title. We'll title it friction force, or force of friction, versus normal force. Okay, let's title our y-axis is force of friction in newtons. Our x-axis is normal force in newtons. Let's get rid of this just because I don't like seeing that there. Okay, let's click on our data. Now let's right-click it. We right-click it. We want to add a trend line. We want to display the equation on the chart. What's the benefit of displaying the equation on the chart? It gives you the slope. That's the mistake I made in the last activity, right? Is when I plotted that graph, I clicked on display the equation on the graph because I'm so used to doing that, which gave you the slope, which gave you the acceleration that I'd asked you to find. So we want to do that this time. We display it on the graph, and we get a slope of 0.54. That tells me that the coefficient of friction here in this particular set of data, the coefficient of friction is 0.54. Does that make sense? Is that hard? Now what do we do with this graph? We got to include it in our write-up, right? So all we're going to do is click on up here somewhere, click on the graph somewhere, right-click, we're going to copy it, and then we're going to go into our document, and we're going to paste it. Simple as that. We can do the same thing with our data table, by the way. We can tidy it up a little bit first. Let's center everything because it looks a little bit neater that way. Let's bold this. Okay, let's put some grid lines in here. We can make it look a lot neater, and then all we have to do literally is, again, highlight the whole thing, right-click, copy it, and then we can go into our document and paste it. Does that make sense? It's quick and it's easy as long as you're not too bad with Microsoft Excel. Now, because this is only due on Monday, you guys have lots of time to do this on Excel at school if you don't have access to that at home. You can go into the library at lunchtime or borrow one of the computers that we have back here during scheduled help and work on it as much as you want and ask me questions on it, and then have it ready to go for Monday. Any questions on that?